Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We love you guys as an audience and certainly appreciate your support. Be sure to go to iTunes, Google Play, and the TuneIn Now app, where you can take and subscribe to the podcast. Be sure to refer your family, friends, neighbors, relatives, mistresses, cockroaches, pool boys, all that good stuff. Also, be sure to go to patreon.com/Chris Voss to support the show. And on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and be sure to give us all your love over there in comments and support. I have a incredible guest here, the CEO and founder of Biotricity. How you doing, bud?
Not bad, Chris. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. I'm going to let you say your name because I've been struggling to get your name right and I don't want to butcher it. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
No problem. Hi, everybody. My name is Waqaas Al-Siddiq. I'm the CEO and founder of Biotricity, and happy to be here to talking to Chris.
Sometime over this next hour, I'm going to get Waqaas down. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
I've got to learn some more languages, man. I got to go back to school and learn how to do stuff. So tell us about Biotricity, who you are. Let's get the audience to know you and more about what you do and what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, personally, I'm an engineer by trade. Converted to business and got into healthcare. Biotricity is a company. We're really focused on remote patient monitoring and really helping diagnose patients quicker, faster, in an intelligent way while they're still, going about their life and not having to be stuck in a lab or stuck in a physician's office. And we built a platform, and we took that platform and applied it in cardiac as a starting point. So we're launching our first product, which is really focused on looking at intelligently diagnosing cardiac arrhythmias remotely.
Wow. So what do you guys use to do the remote? Does a doctor insert something inside them and then it sends a signal to something, or?
That's a good question. I mean, most of our stuff is really focused on non-invasive. We find that anytime you get into invasive procedures, it's just, some patients are really, afraid of it. They don't like to, pierce their skin. So it's an external device. It's got 3 little sticky patches that get put on you, and the device is kind of like a little cell phone, and it takes a SIM card. So it actually is a cell phone, but a very specialized medical cell phone. And it collects the data from those little leads and analyzes the information. And anytime it detects an anomaly, it transmits it to a call center. And the call center can see that data in real time. And they can determine, okay, hey, this is an emergency situation, or it's not an emergency situation. And based on what the physician has written out in the prescription, they will respond. So they can, call the patient, they can call emergency. And so the idea really is to get the patient home, going about their life and not worrying that, if something really critical happens, I got to go back, I got to take the device, it's got to download the data, and then 2 weeks later I get a report. No, this is instantaneous. And we can do that because we've built in the connectivity right into the device.
That is wild. And it's got the SIM card right in there so it can just call. I'll tell you a funny story, just a quick one, as we're going into the introducing you and stuff. Back in the day, I owned a courier company, and we used to have this thing called a heart scan, and they would insert, I think, it was invasive, but they would insert a little thing into the people's heart to look for, I think, arrhythmias or something like that, and irregularities. And they would have to wear like a little Walkman with a tape in it, a cassette tape. and our courier company would deliver the tapes to the people and then pick them up, and they would take the cassette tape and look at their arrhythmia. So this is just amazing how far the technology has come from the cassette tapes that we used to pick up. That's amazing.
No, absolutely. And what's interesting is even now, the cassette technology has kind of improved, and what they're doing is they've got devices like that still that are recording, and then you bring the device back to the physician, and then they download the data, but it's obviously all electronic now, and then they'll interpret and analyze and they'll return it. But you're still waiting 2 weeks before you get a response. And you've got 3 visits, right? You got to pick up the device, you got to put it on, then you got to return it, and then you got to come in for the report. And ours is all done within 2 visits.
That's amazing. That's amazing what you guys can do nowadays with medical stuff and technology. It just phones in. Like anytime you can create a product that keeps me from having to go into the doctor's office on a frequent basis, that's a great product in my book.
Yeah, and I think the other thing which is always important when you think about patients is that a lot of stuff happens when they're doing their normal routine, and not everyone's aware of their internal symptoms, right? You know, some people are more sensitive, whereas other people are kind of like, you know, I don't even feel anything, and suddenly, you know, they're in the hospital, and that becomes, I think, the interesting piece of being able to really go into the future of technology, where devices themselves are kind of passively and actively looking at you, and you really don't have to do anything, and suddenly the report is sent and you get a call.
Wow. And you can save lives because you're getting to people right when they have a heart attack or something.
Exactly. And we can also save lives because you know, we know who the patient is, right? Sometimes the patient has a heart attack, we don't have any data, we don't know who the patient is. And the speed of diagnostics is also very important. I mean, we've talked to some cardiologists, and they've said that, hey, I had a patient, I put him on a monitor, and I was waiting for the report, and the patient died in between.
Because there's some liability there, huh?
Exactly.
Where you can get some lawsuits, and you're like, well, if they should have done this and they should have done that. You know, my dad operated for a lot of his years from a birth defect from some medication that was given to his mom in, I believe, the 40s or 50s, you know, back when they didn't understand that some of the stuff that affects the fetal. He suffered for most of his life where a part of his heart was leaking, I guess. So he always had low energy. He really struggled. And one day they finally came across it, and they had to do a thing where they went up and sealed it up through his leg. And I remember he struggled with his heart for years. You know, it had done some damage, all the stuff that had happened with this thing and having over the years. But I remember I was actually on a Skype call with him because he lived in a different state. And I was on a Skype call. I think we were talking to him on birthday or holiday or something. And he turned to me like this, and you know, everything was fine. Turned to me like this, and I watched the left side of his face just droop. It was the most shocking thing I've ever seen. It was like a horror show. And he suddenly started talking in slow motion to me. And I was like, either he's having a heart attack or I'm having a heart attack. Yeah, you could just be wandering around fine and everything's kosher. And, you know, they knew that he was a patient that had issues. And so he could have been served by your product and being monitored. Thankfully, thank God, he was sitting in a room all by himself talking on Skype with me. And fortunately, and my family had left the room, and they were over yickety-yakking in some other part of the home. And, you know, I witnessed him going into a stroke, and was able to yell out, scream, start calling them to get them back in the room and get him to the ER. But yes, a device like your thing, and in a case like that where someone's having a cardiac arrest or a cardiac event, time is everything when it comes to getting into the ER, right?
Absolutely. So they have this thing called, you know, door to balloon time, where they say, okay, from the time that you have this event to the time that you're in the hospital, the balloon goes up. And if you can do it within a certain amount of time, you can avoid muscle damage, right? And if it's longer than that, then you get muscle damage. And once you have muscle damage, you're like 70 or 80% more likely to have another heart attack. And that's why these situations are so critical, right? If you can prevent or deal with it ahead of time, because, you know, once you've had a heart attack and you went outside of that window, now you've got 70, 80% likely probability of having another heart attack, right? You are now effectively got a heart that has some level of damage, and the likelihood is very, very high. And that's why you see these, some of these individuals, they'll have, you know, 2 heart attacks, 3 heart attacks, 4 heart attacks, because that original one messed up the muscle and it wasn't dealt with in a short enough time span. And I think that is, you know, where I think modern medicine and technology is going to help us just kind of shorten those times and be able to leverage data to effectively take care of patients and more effectively, so that they can live better lives long term.
I was just thinking of a bit of a joke that this could be a new revenue stream for AT&T to get my data package up.
You laugh about that, but one of our partners is AT&T. So,
oh, are they really? We love AT&T. AT&T sends us phones to review. We've got the AT&T Note 8 and the Samsung Galaxy S8. But I was just thinking of a bit of a comedy joke on that, where it's like, I'm having a heart attack. Oh, you didn't pay your monthly bill. But no, this is amazing. I had a write-up with Forbes several years ago where I was complaining about waiting rooms and doctors and the archaic system of the medical system, and what a nightmare it was. Just I got into a horrible infection from burning a toe, and then it turned into a horrible infection that almost ended up in a bone scrape, and largely because of the idiocy of the doctor's office. And it's ironic, sometimes they act in such a way to try and prevent lawsuits, they actually end up creating them with the horrible way that they do business. And so something like this, back then I talked to Forbes about how, why can't we have the medical rules streamlined where we can have devices like what you guys are doing. We can have more teledoctor. I'm like, why can't I Skype my doctor? Why do I have to go wait in a waiting room for 3 bloody hours or 2 bloody hours, which I did on occasion for this foot? I'm like, that's idiocy. Why can't I just Skype my doctor? And we can talk over the thing, or we can talk over a mobile phone. And since then, I really feel like an idiot, because I really thought about starting a company like the ones that are out now, where they actually have teledoctor and they've advanced that sort of stuff. But it did seem like a nightmare to go through the logistics that doctors have to go. But it's great that you guys are able to develop products like what you guys are doing, because that can really help people. And I'm sure a lot of the people that you guys are servicing are older people. They're single and alone because they probably outlived their partner. They're alone in their home, and if they have an event, there's usually no one there except maybe a visiting nurse on occasion to discover them.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. And even sometimes when you have individuals even in nursing homes or assisted care facilities, I mean, you've got one nurse with so many different rooms and individuals. By the time that they actually detect something or determine something, versus being able to have devices that okay, look, this patient has a cardiac condition, they're living alone, or they have some level of assisted care, but we want to be able to monitor them remotely, so that if there is a scenario or a situation, we can address it. Plus, it's cheaper on the system. I mean, imagine someone gets a heart attack or gets a major issue, you didn't detect it, now they're in the hospital, you've got to go through surgery. I'm thinking worst case scenario, and now you've got a $250,000 bill that effectively cost will stay and all of that. And it could have all been streamlined in a much cheaper way by being able to deal with it in a preventative way. And I think that's where us as a company, Biotricity, we're really focused on how do we move away from this reactive care system and really focus on prevention, preventative care, and really be able to go and deliver interesting technologies, but that are medically relevant. And chronic care is a huge issue for the United States, and cardiac is a starting point for us, but our focus is to go beyond that.
Yeah, my grandmother actually passed away from a cardiac event. She was in her 80s, but she was fairly healthy up until then. But she passed away from a cardiac event or some sort of event. I don't think we really did an autopsy, but she passed away in her home, and sadly she died crawling towards the door because she didn't have any, they didn't have cell phones back then. But certainly something like this can save lives when it comes to, your loved ones and everything else, on top of the technological factor that just makes it pretty awesome. Yeah,
no, I agreed, and you're 100% right. And it's sad to hear about that story about your grandmother, and that happens in America all the time. And the issue that we're constantly seeing is also that people need a feedback mechanism. Right? It's like, why do gym memberships lapse? They did a whole analysis on why gyms are so profitable. It's because like, I think it's like 37 or 38% of the membership, they just lapse. And the reason is because you go work out for a week or 2 weeks, but you see no change.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see a change. You're like, okay, well, forget this. And it's the same thing. You have a heart attack. You have that kind of initial thing. You're in the hospital. Everything's bad. And for like a month, you're on it. But then after about a month, you're like, okay, well, I'm the same. My weight's the same. I really don't see any change. And you fall off that wagon. But if you get that feedback and saying, hey, buddy, you're actually not improving, or you've improved 5% and you need to improve by 25%. Like, you can quantify it and you can get that instantaneous response. That's where the future is. And that's where you'll get people to engage. And studies have proven it. And we know from our own lives, when we, sometimes you have a neighbor, a daughter, a son, a loved one, sister, brother, husband, wife, whatever, that is kind of nagging you, that certainly moves the needle a little bit. But for the people that don't have that, you need to have that feedback mechanism.
I probably need one of those because I don't have a wife or kids. I just have my dogs to monitor me. And I hit 50, I think, in January. So I'm kind of wondering where, we go. I've led a really good, healthy life. In fact, I can't remember the last time I've seen a doctor, but he has seen me. I'm looking at your guys' website. You guys have the stats here. 51.7% of U.S. adults have at least one chronic disease. 7 out of 10 number of chronic diseases in list of top 10 causes of death. That's good to know where I'm headed. 86% of healthcare dollars spent on chronic diseases. And we know the healthcare costs are out of control in this country. Hopefully something like yours can save money in office visits and billables to Medicare, billables to the different insurance companies. I mean, I imagine insurance companies love this sort of product.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing is, anytime you have a high risk patient, you got to keep them under observation in the hospital. That's $1,500 a night. And, our device is in a remote category, so it's a significantly less billing, and it's a fixed price. So whether it's used for 5 days or 30 days, it's the same amount of dollars. You can get the patient out and you put them on a device like this. So, the idea is to definitely reduce the cost system. And I think that's where the system is going, because, in the United States, I think if you compare us to Europe, we spend about 2.5 to 3 times as much in healthcare expenditures on a yearly basis per individual on average. And we die like 5 years earlier. So it doesn't seem like a good ROI on that one.
Well, we've come a long way, baby. I mean, like I say, I remember back this was the 90s, and we would literally take, somehow this thing would hook into a Walkman, and it had a cassette in it, and that cassette would record for like 2 or 3 days the heart, what was going on with the person's heart, and then we take it back and they'd transcribe it into the computers, and they'd run the whole 3 days of whatever on this cassette, and it was really funny. They always made a big deal about the batteries. They're like, make sure the batteries don't get anywhere cold, so the battery, we get a good battery read and stuff. And now you guys have got this device. How big is the device in size?
It's quite small. It's I'd say about this big, and about that big.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at your guys' website. You guys have a product called BioFlux and BioLife. Are we talking about BioLife?
We're talking about BioFlux. BioLife is a future product that we're coming up.
Okay.
So the way that we as a company are looking at it is, we diagnose the patient first, and then once we've diagnosed the patient, we know we have to, this patient has a chronic condition. They fall within that 51.7% category, and now they have to manage that condition for the rest of their life. So the idea is to come out with a follow-on product, which is more individual and personal based, that they can use, every day to manage their condition.
So BioFlux is an advanced mobile cardiac telemetry system with a high precision ECG device and proprietary software. Real-time remote data monitored 24/7 for up to 30 consecutive days. That's just amazing. I recently got, this seems a little silly, but by comparison, I recently got a monitor for my dog. It's not a heart monitor, but it's a monitor that tells me where he's at if he escapes, and actually monitors his activity, his sleeps, and all that sort of good stuff. And it has a 3G SIM card in it. It's just a little thing, and it tells me how things are going for him. That would be so great for me if I could just have everything hooked up to a 3G card or 4G card, and I could just avoid the doctor. In fact, like, you guys should probably figure out a product where I can skip my colonoscopy that I have to do when I turn 50, I guess. I know they have a thing now where I don't know how accurate it is, but evidently you can just take a home kit into the restroom and it will give you some idea if you have the genetics of colon cancer. I think you really do have to go in for a screening and visit a doctor. But man, there's some things I'd really like to avoid having to do with the doctors as I age.
That's true. A lot of people want to avoid a lot of that stuff. And I think, as we get into more genetic testing and DNA, and there's a 23andMe, which does a whole genetic profile, and it looks at, if you carry any degenerative conditions and those kinds of things. Those are things that are absolutely going to be able to help identify whether or not a patient is susceptible to something, and hopefully avoid certain tests, or if not, at least identify so that you can at least try to deal with it early on. A lot of times, like, okay, look, you're at high risk for this because you've got this gene. Let's deal with it when you're like 16, not when you're 65 and you've already, exacerbated the situation.
So I'm looking at the device on you guys' website. It's at Biotricity.com. This thing's really cool. And so they can see on the screen, I'm seeing a graph on it. Is that what they will see if they're a patient?
Exactly. So they can see that in a patient situation. If the patient feels something, they can push a button, and then they can actually identify which symptom they're feeling. So it's like, oh, I'm feeling shortness of breath, or I'm feeling dizzy. And if they don't push it, it doesn't matter. It'll still transmit it, but it allows the call center to immediately know, okay, hey, this patient is having this situation and they're feeling this. And that allows them to potentially get even a more a clearer understanding or picture of what is actually going on with the patient to determine how they can deal or help that patient, right? So obviously if someone's having shortness of breath or dizziness and they're able to punch that into the device, it may say, okay, you're actually having a heart attack. We need to dispatch ER, versus, you're sitting there watching TV and you feel nothing. You still might actually be having a heart attack. You just don't have a lot of symptoms. Those are kind of things
I
that
actually have a lot of heart events, but usually it's when I'm watching a certain leader of our country speak. I mean, to get this, is Chris having a heart attack, or is he just watching Donald Trump on TV? But this is a really cool looking little device. Like I said, I'm looking at on your website, and this is pretty amazing. And it looks like it's just got an internal battery, and so you just recharge it by plugging into USB port, I think.
Correct. So we've got a fast charge system. So the idea is that the device can actually last for about 48 hours, but you're going in, you're showering, you plug it in while you're doing your morning things, and it charges up to full, and then you can use it, based on what the doctor recommends. Some patients will use it 24 hours. Some patients will wear it at night. Some will wear it just during the day. And I, like I said, the cool thing about it is the fact that it's really should give that patient that peace of mind that, oh, look, I'm at home, but if there's a situation or there's an issue, the device is actually intelligent. It's actually being able to interpret and analyze. And I can, when I go back to the physician's office, the report is already there. It's not like I got to sit there.
You don't have to sit there waiting for it to download or any stupid stuff where you're like what they used to do with the cassette. Where they're like, we got to play this cassette for an hour and have it come across the printer and dude, this is amazing. If you're listening to this right now, go to biotricity.com, check out the BioFlex, and you can look at this little cool device. I'm a gadget dude, and so I'm just enthralled with this device and looking at it online. Wow, so so the patient can take a look and monitor their own health to see how it's going. And I suppose as long as you see a heartbeat going, you're still alive. If it flatlines, you're probably in trouble, or it's come undone probably. But this is pretty darn cool, and it's non-invasive, so that they don't, the problem with this, it was a company called HeartScan back in the day. And the problem is they did have to go in and put the lead wires somehow into something to be able to do this monitoring. So there was invasiveness, which is a shock to the system as well. And 24/7 monitoring, another story that may seem redundant, but another story of this that comes from my family is my uncle 2 years ago. He wasn't in the greatest of health, but I think he was only in his late 70s, but he was a pretty vibrant guy. And one day he was sitting down with his family and they were having lunch or something. And he goes, I'm going to go upstairs for a nap. And he'd never really had any massive events like a heart attack or anything like that before. And he went up and went to sleep and never woke up. And they went up and found him. He passed away in his sleep, most likely from a heart attack or heart event. And this would have been a great sort of thing for him to, that probably would have saved his life, and they would have had an extension of him for maybe, 5 to 7 years. His brother certainly lived far beyond that. So genetically, they should have been pretty good. But yeah, there's just so many episodes of this. So it auto triggers anytime there's, I'm seeing the whole list of stuff that I can't even pronounce here, of medical things.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a variety of areas that it'll auto trigger, and then you can manually trigger it too. So if you feel something, you can push the button, and then it sends it to a call center. You've got trained technicians there. They'll look at it and they'll be like, "Oh, it's nothing, right? It might just be indigestion or something else. You're not really feeling anything." But the fact that you can manually trigger it and have someone review that data instantly is also super cool. And I think the thing that people don't realize is how big of an issue cardiac is. I mean, and it's not just in America. In pretty much every country in the world, it's between 30 to 38% of all deaths. Mm-hmm. There's 1 in 3 people dying every year is because of a cardiac issue.
Wow. Yeah, this is pretty amazing. IoT connectivity on 3G and 4G cellular networks. Hey, Google, can you check my heart rate? Am I having a heart attack?
I don't know how to help with that.
Okay, so I guess you guys still need to get Google and Alexa integration. FDA cleared software features advanced beat and arrhythmia auto detection for increased clinical yield. 3 channels of remote ECG data recorded for 30 days. Sampling rate of up to 1,000 readings per second, providing unparalleled clinical precision. And yeah, that's just amazing, this little thing. I almost want one just to have one because I'm such a gadget collector. I don't need one, but let's hopefully, knock on wood, there won't be anything soon. Yeah, anything that can be done. I imagine this really helps with lawsuits. The keeping a patient alive certainly helps keep you from having lawsuits and the class action attorneys calling. So that's always a good thing, since that seems to be one of the parameters that drive up health costs in this country. Yes. Is a lot of doctors have had to go out of business because just the high cost of malpractice insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
And when people can sue and it's cheaper just to pay it than to fight it, I mean, you wonder why we have the problems that we have in this world with the technology that's out there. So what is the new product you guys are working on gonna be like there? Do you want to talk to us about that, or is that a bit of a secret, or?
Slightly secret, but I can certainly, maybe comment a little bit about it. We are basically looking at a personalized device, but it's not like a lifestyle solution. It's not meant for like the people who are healthy. It's actually meant for people who have already been diagnosed. So you've been diagnosed, you have a cardiac issue, you're on a medication or you've had a surgical operation. How do you manage your health on a day-to-day basis so that you have a feedback mechanism that enables you to essentially see whether or not you're improving or not, right? So the idea to keep that patient engaged. So that's the device, the personalized thing. And then we're going into other areas which I think are interesting. You had mentioned about your father with the heart defect, I believe, earlier. So high-risk pregnancies, very interesting problem, because the products and the devices are so expensive that they just pick a random day and they say, hey, maybe Tuesday at 2 p.m., we're going to monitor this mom to see if there's something going on. And then, it comes out negative and they're like, okay, let's try again in 2 weeks, Thursday at 5 p.m. It's very arbitrary. And so our idea is to, get the device cheap enough, enable the hospital or a physician or a obstetrician to give it to the mother so that she can take it home and she can be monitored continuously. And so for high-risk pregnancies, in the United States, you got 2% or between 1.5 to 2% of babies that are stillborn, which is astonishing in the first world, right? Where we have technology, where we should be able to make it cheap and affordable so that it can be given to them so that they can be using it at home and going about their life. So it's the same idea. So we want to get into the prenatal, and then from there we'll get into, things around, pulmonary lung function and other chronic care areas. So anything that's really chronic, we're interested in.
Yeah, when you're a mom and you're carrying around a baby, especially at 7 to 9 months, getting up, wandering down to the doctor's office and sitting in for 2 hours in a hospital waiting room and all that jazz that you go through to see a doctor, that can't be fun. You got to get up on the table and then, Jesus, you got to wear that stupid outfit with your butt hanging out the back. So anything I can do to avoid that. Of course, around the house, we call that Wednesdays. But this is pretty amazing. I'm just looking over your website, and it's pretty cool, all the stuff that goes into it. I know I'm using a lot of real life examples here, but this is the application. My mom, with her fourth child, she passed a kidney stone just right before she gave birth. And for a week or two, it was hell to pay, and it was wreaking havoc on just her whole system. And she was in and out of the hospital with it. And they thought about it might be a good indication. Can you guys monitor? Is it possible to monitor a baby's heartbeat inside of a mother?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the idea. That's the idea around the prenatal monitoring for us, is to separate out and look at the baby's heartbeat and heart rate, and the baby's ECG, and then the mom's. Because what's interesting is that the reason issues happen, sometimes the mother is actually in perfect health, and you can't actually tell that there's anything wrong with the baby, because the mother, she looks like she's in great health and there's no issues, all her numbers are perfect, but there's something wrong with the baby. And then that's where, having technology that's cheap enough that you can leverage, you can identify those things. And the fetal heart rate is very important to understand and determine and look at, and that is absolutely something that we can pick up if you have sensitive enough technology, and we do.
And that's really important. I've had friends that were women that were pregnant, and their babies somewhere in the pregnancy thing went dead. Their heartbeat went dead for some reason or another, and they didn't know. And for weeks they were carrying it, and they had no idea until they started to see symptoms or signs from their body, and they went to the doctor, and it was very tragic and heartbreaking for them. And something like this, that could lower mortality rates for births and everything else is just amazing. And this is awesome that technology is bringing this to the thing. If I can have an app for it instead of having to go to the doctor, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, it's some situations are like really sad, and you'll find that the mother's like, oh, the baby stopped kicking, but it's already too late.
Yeah.
They notice it. They're noticing it later. It goes back to some moms, and some individuals are super sensitive. Like, they notice their sleep patterns. They notice if they're slightly off. I travel so much. I do 200,000 miles a year. So I can't even tell if my sleep pattern is good or bad, because it's generally just awful. So, versus other people, they'll know immediately, oh, this mattress doesn't work and this thing. And for me, it's just I have no concept of it. So I would never be sensitive to something that would happen in my sleep. I'd just be oh, maybe I'm jet lagged, or maybe it's this. But really, it's some other bigger issue that I'm simply ignoring because I'm just used to, being in a state that is generally overexerted. And those are interesting things. And then you got people who are super diligent. Like my mom, both my parents are diabetics, and my mom is super diligent. She knows, oh, if I eat more protein, it's better for my sugar. and I have to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to avoid this. And she's very, very good about managing her care and her diet and her exercise and all that. And my dad is like, oh, I'll just shoot a little bit more insulin, but I'm having that pecan tart, totally different type of guy, right? Where he's like, yeah, I got insulin, I'll just shoot. But, the ramification of it long term, those are the things that, you're not able to see because the data is not available, or you don't have a device that is continuously monitoring you. And so that's where it becomes really, really important, because you want to see the trend. Like, okay, fine, maybe he's doing that, but over a year, it turns out that, hey, guess what? Your baseline glucose levels or hemoglobin levels are actually higher than they were in the beginning of the year. And it's probably, that one day a week that you're, kind of cheating, which you thought is not, making a difference, is actually compounding the problem. So, those things are very interesting, I think.
That could be really huge for diabetics, especially with the out of control diabetes that we're having in this country. I have a friend who has diabetes, and I believe it's the pancreas. Her pancreas, or whatever the organ is that deals with all that, is completely dead, and so she has to. She's one of those diabetics where she has to be really on it with her diet. She has to make sure she takes her stuff, or she ends up in the ER. And it's a life or death situation. I think she was in a coma at one time. That's how she found out the hard way with where she was. But yeah, having stuff for this, another thing, and I'm sure you got your hands full there, but another great product that would be great. My sister suffers from MS, multiple sclerosis. And it's interesting how as the MS moves around the body, or at least the scar tissue that it creates, and then the dysfunction that it creates in different parts of the body, like she'll have a couple weeks where her eye's going one way, and then she'll have another day where her legs won't work. And if there was a way somehow somebody could have some sort of monitor or feedback to tell her what's going on with her body, or a doctor what's going on with her body, because we constantly have to wheel her into the doctor and be like, well, this is going on this week, and is this long term, is this short term, and everything else. Your staff had sent me some different things that is in the scope of what you're thinking about and dealing with. Several different trends. I'm just going to run off a few of them here. There's rules-based engines will be augmented with voice recognition and analysis in the future with healthcare technology. Artificial intelligence will become more prevalent. Bluetooth cellular connectivity will be the norm in medical devices. In fact, if I could get me never mind. Telemedicine will grow in importance, and healthcare technologies will morph and expand. The only thing I fear about telemedicine being growing in importance is if my doctor turns his phone line into a 1-900 line. So, doctor, I'm having a heart attack. Deposit 25 cents for additional. Credit card's been declined. We're going to need a credit card to put you through the doctor. But no, one of the things I talked about with Forbes was the advancement of telemedicine. In fact, I think that's where your staff saw my Forbes article, and that's where they sent me the data off of on you guys. AI is a big thing. One of my friends, Robert Scoble, talks and writes about AI. How do you see that applying towards the future of healthcare industry?
Yeah, I think, AI, and I talk about AI, and I've published a number of articles on it, and we've actually been in Forbes a couple of times too. So, but AI, I think it's stages, right? Because a lot of people are afraid of AI and how it's going to work. But I think, AI is a very broad category, and I think there's a few points where it's going to start appearing, and I think it's going to start within the next couple of years, and as early as next year, where AI is going to come in and it's going to look at all of those facets of your issue, like you said, with your sister who has MS. It looks at all of those facets, and then it cross-references that with all of the data that it has that's all around the world, or in all the health databases and all of the scientific reports that have been done to look at, okay, if these symptoms are going on and this is what other patient populations are going on, this is what I potentially think is happening with the patient. Kind of like a guidance or suggestion. And that suggestion helps the physician fast track, right? Because right now, think about a physician, right? They've memorized all of this information and they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, I look at these XYZ symptoms and I'm looking at these symptoms, and based on these symptoms, I'm going to come up with a tree and I'm going to determine that, okay, I think it's likely one of these three scenarios. And sometimes you get these really weird cases. I'm sure you watched that show House a while back where he's, this crazy doctor who looks at, weird cases that are anomalies. What's interesting is, I have a friend, he's an ER doc, and he said, one time a patient came in and they found the patient passed out in the middle of, one of those sidewalks on the grass. And they brought the patient in and they looked at everything. And he's like, I looked at everything. And, based on my experience, I'm like, it's got to be monoxide poisoning. But the guy was found outside. So how would monoxide poisoning happen when the guy's outside? And it just didn't, he's like, it didn't add up. But I was like, I had to go by, what my gut feeling was. Now, some doctors would kind of remove that, right? They would say, no, the guy was found outside, so let's remove that scenario. Turned out that the guy did have monoxide poisoning. It was just, he had it at home. It was not enough for him to pass out at home. And he went out to go to the store, and it eventually took hold of his body, and he passed out later. So it's an interesting situation, right? Where you think doctors really will follow the weird or the anomaly path because they fundamentally believe that, anomalies occur and it could be one of them. And others are like, no. I'm going to go by the XYZ case. It's outside. It can't be monoxide poisoning, even though that was within my tree structure, and they'll go down a different path. So, those are interesting situations where I think that, we will see AI coming in. And then later on, what I think, AI will get into is actually, looking at interpretation, where it's going to go beyond suggestion. It's going to say, okay, look, this is what I think it is, right? And here's what my treatment plan is and treatment thought is. And the other aspect is that it will provide all of the evidence saying that, okay, look, based on this patient, look at this profile, because everyone's different, right? Saying, okay, look, this is, a Caucasian male versus, an African-American female versus, an Indian American, old lady, right? But they all have the same situation, but the treatment plan might be different because of age, because of a background, because of a variety of other factors, and AI could come in and cross-reference all that data and say, okay, look, here's the treatment plan, and this is the best treatment plan because it knows the outcomes, because you can immediately cross-reference the data from all clinical trials and all the data that's available. And that's going to be powerful.
And is there databases set up for this then?
So there are certain databases. I mean, obviously you have the original scientific journals and all that, and you have to kind of synthesize and collect that data. Then there's a lot of data that you can tap into, like there are the WebMDs and the Cleveland Clinics and some of these organizations that provide public data available. And then there's data that you can license, like from pharmaceutical companies or even from hospital institutions that have done research in particular areas. And hospitals are interesting. They have a lot of data too, right? Because they've got all these patients and they've seen what's happening with patients. They've put all this medication. A lot of this data has not been synthesized, collected, interpreted, and analyzed. And this is where AI is going to be able to come in, collect it, and analyze it. So, there's a long answer, but the short answer to your question is yes, some of it is publicly available. You can grab at it immediately. Some of it is private and you're going to have to license it and get to it, but certainly it's the direction.
It was interesting to me years ago when Vice President Joe Biden, after his son passed away from cancer, they enacted that cancer database thing where they were going to spend some money to build this giant cancer database where there could be the congruency of data and information on treatments and different treatments that were maybe experimentations that were working that no one had tried before, in doctors attempting to resolve problems, but building a nationwide or international sort of database where everyone could tap into this thing and go, basically like a Google search, like, hey, this is going on sort of thing in a sophisticated nature. And I remember hearing about it and I was just like, what? You mean we don't have that? Like, Somebody hasn't thought of that already? That a billion that. I'm like, holy crap. He's like, and I never thought about it until I listened to what he was doing. And I'm like, just everyone's working in these little silos of knowledge and information. And if one guy's, comes up with a treatment to resolve problems over here, no one else knows about it. And, I mean, this is part of what the information age is supposed to bring us, this continuity of information and data, and being able to have everyone of kind of the same sort of mind, or at least knowledge, where they can have access to it. To me, that's just huge. And so, yeah, it would be interesting. There's a lot of people that, like I said, my friend Robert Scoll writes about AI and talks about AI, VR and AR as well in Silicon Valley. And it's interesting the things they're doing with it. There's kind of an eye that people turn to it, like kind of the time. Anytime I see the Boston Dynamics robot videos, those ones with the dog. Anytime I see those videos, I have the soundtrack from Terminator rolling through my head. Dun, 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 dun. And so all I can think of is Skynet. We're screwed. But and then you think of I know the AIs. They've had discussions where, like, if a computer decides, well, how do we fix humans that have disease? Oh, we killed them. So we took care of the disease. Which there's some people that do believe humans are a bit of a scourge on the planet. So maybe that might be a good thing. I don't know.
Well, there's certainly the apocalyptic angle, right? And I tend to look at the glass half full side, and at the end of the day, I think that there's technology is going to improve, and there's going to be a lot more good from it than the apocalyptic scenarios. But everyone,
I gotta do that for comedy for the show. Right? So I mean, do you see this as something that these sort of techniques that are coming into place, some of the trends we mentioned here, do you see those as helping us live longer? Like, am I going to be living to 125, 150, or?
Statistically, it's funny if you look at the last 50 years, right? Think about your great grandparents, right? Like, or most of these people, died. 60, 70 was a good age, right? Yeah. Now 60, 70 is like, oh, you've got 40 years ahead of you. And then once you've been diagnosed with a chronic condition or something like that, even at 75, we'll keep you alive an extra 10 years just because of through drugs, right? Mm-hmm. And so I certainly believe that we will be able to live longer. Right now, they're saying that there are more people living above 100 than there ever have been historically. Yeah. Right? Yeah. 70, 80 is a typical age. 70, 80 used to be the time you're dying. And that's why what's interesting is the entire shift has happened. People were having children younger, right? Mm-hmm. They were getting married. Like, we think about back 300, 400 years, people are getting married at 17, 16, 18. They're having kids very, very young. But it's because the guys are and the girls are dying at 40, 50 years old, right? So, they're having their children much, much younger. And now the whole thing has shifted, right? Where we're having children later in our life because, guess what? You can have a kid at 50 and you're going to live till 80. The kid gone through university, has gone to, is a professional and stuff like that. And you're still alive, hanging out, 80. And that's the interesting thing, I think. And I think that as we learn more about our genomes, as we learn more about, chronic conditions, as more data becomes available, we'll actually be able to live longer, healthier. And the key thing is not about just living longer and you're like, about to, fall over and can't take care of yourself, but living, more richer lives, right? We're at 80, we can move around. Life. Exactly, quality of life. So to be 85, 90 and have good quality of life, that is where it's going to be.
I think once I hit 75, I'm just going to have a lobotomy. So then I'm happy no matter what goes on after that. I mean, Billy Joel just had a kid. I forget how old he is, but I think he's 60s, 70s. And he just had a baby. So if we can keep guys like him around, I suppose that's maybe a good thing. But yeah, definitely living longer. I had a doctor on who's a veterinary science doctor when we were talking about pet care and different things like that. And we got into discussions of cancers and stuff because one of my puppies recently passed with cancer. And what we talked about was, I was like, why is this happening and everything else? And she's like, Chris, humans, dogs, we're all living longer. Our medical stuff is getting better. Like what you mentioned before. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize Social Security, when they set it up, I believe in the 60s, when they set up Social Security, late 50s, 60s, when they set up Social Security, they set the 65 barrier because it was like winning the lottery if you made it to 65. They're like, 10% of the people make it there. We'll give them some money for the reward. And now, like, they've even had to push that back a little bit to 70. And, people are, like you say, living to 80s and 90s. Even my mom, she talks about passing away and stuff, but her mother, they drank, they smoke. I mean, they drank and smoked back in that era where, doctors were smoking in hospital rooms and stuff. And her mom lived into her 80s. And my mom I don't think she's ever had a cardiac event. She's in her mid 70s. I've worked out with her at the gym when she goes in the morning. She can kick my butt when it comes to working out. I mean, she does a whole hour of whatever, and she's just an exercising mama, and so she's really healthy, and she talks about passing away, and I'm like, Mom, your genetics from your mom, she smoked and drank, and they were smoking, the rotten stuff in the 60s and 50s that God knows what, probably had arsenic, lead, and everything else in it. It's like, menthols taste great. Your doctor recommends Camels. And so she's probably going to live to 100. In fact, I've lived a very different life than she has. She's lived a very religious life. And so she's been chased from alcohol and drugs and smoking and stuff, although she did grow up in a smoking home, but and where I've actually had quite a bit of fun with the alcohol derision of drugs. So I'm not sure that, I think her liver might be better off than mine at this point, even at her age. So she might outlive me, but definitely I want to keep her around, and devices like what you guys have developed are pretty amazing. Your staff sent me this thing, trend number 3, Bluetooth and cellular connectivity will be the norm in medical devices. Am I just going to be covered in different patch devices that at any moment they're gonna phone home?
No, I think a lot of the devices are going to get integrated, multiple sensors, and they're all going to get connected, and you'll use them at different times and at different purposes. And obviously, some people will have multiple conditions, so they will have multiple devices. But I think it's going to be a consolidation of sensors, and everything's getting smaller and cheaper and better. But the connectivity piece is certainly a piece that connectivity has become cheaper. I mean, you got, remember when cell phones first came out? Now it's unlimited data. You can have, if you use, I remember my T-Mobile thing. It says if you use above 50 gigabytes in a month, you might see a reduction in speed. I mean, that's a lot of data on a device. You can imagine, and then you were joking about AT&T, but at the end of the day, for the networks, they invest so much, billions in infrastructure. They want more devices connected, and data is cheap enough. And for us, we want the data offloaded so that we can build those centralized information systems, right? So that we can benefit and be able to cross-reference that data and determine what is good for us.
It would be. Years ago, and you've probably seen this sort of venue of these people now that are hacking their bodies and their devices.
Quantified.
A couple years ago at South by Southwest, I was there, and there was a little conference that someone was trying to start. I don't know if they ever got far with it, but it was basically, in fact, I'm pretty sure it's still around. And it was a conference of people who believe in biohacking, and they biohacked their bodies. And it was pretty amazing stuff. In fact, I went out and I got the website hackablehuman.com, and I think I have the Facebook page and all this stuff for Hackable Human in the future. But it's pretty amazing the stuff these guys were doing. And it would be great if in the future I could have a device either through something in my phone or a watch I'm wearing or a ring I'm wearing, because so many of the smartwatches that come to me nowadays do a lot of different monitoring. I actually use Moco Care's blood pressure monitoring thing, and I can put it on my wrist and it will give me my blood pressure. I've been seeing these diabetic things where you can take and do a pinprick with the blood and you can insert it into your iPhone. It's a plug that goes in. It's just amazing what's going on with technology, and yeah, hopefully this thing can really save lives. You were talking about care centers as well. I have both my sisters are in care centers, and the level of care and being able to get to them and take care of the patient when there's episodes is just insane. It's just getting normal care without problems, and people doing their job is just a nightmarish issue over there, those care centers. So having something like this that could monitor those people would definitely be amazing. And then you have some people that can't care for themselves. My sister with the deep MS is in very deep dementia, and so half the time if something goes wrong, she's not there to call in for it or hit the bell buzzer. Sometimes they have to make sure that the bell buzzer is always by her hands when she's in bed. But sometimes she's not clear on what's going on herself,
right.
and she doesn't, everything's gone now with her where she doesn't know, she doesn't just have the function like, oh, I should call 911. That's not even on her radar anymore.
No, that's exactly right. It's funny. It brings me up a point about BMW, and a friend of mine got one of the new BMW SUVs, and he was going in for servicing, and he was asking the service guy, he's like, hey, when should I service the car? And he's like, well, we don't actually know with the new BMW. Before it was all set at this time. Now the car will let you know, because everyone drives differently. So it's got all these sensors. So based on your brake patterns, your driving habits and stuff like that, you might be getting serviced at 10,000 miles while someone else is being serviced at 15 or 20,000 miles. And the same thing with our bodies and what's going to happen, I think, as care evolves. And like I said, with the additional data and the cross-referencing, the offloading with IoT, and then the AI coming in and interpreting and analyzing that stuff, it'll say, oh, hey, Chris, it's time for you to connect with your doctor. He's going to be, we've scheduled it. It's 2 p.m. on Monday. And you're going to phone in, and he's already got the reports and the data, and he's having a conversation with you. And, those are the interesting proactive things where I think we will really move towards that. Yeah.
There's another example I was thinking of that's really amazing for this sort of stuff. I remember with my dad, he went through about 2 or 3 heart things that keep your heart going and stuff like that. Pacemaker. He had a heart pacemaker, and he went through 2 or 3 of them. And the latest 2 that they put into him actually had defibrillators built into them, which was crazy. And he had to have a new one put in, one of the latest ones put in, because one of them misfired on him when he was asleep one night. I think he might have died in his sleep, because he did that a couple times actually. And the defibrillator brought him back alive. That's what it was, actually. It wasn't a misfire. He actually died in his sleep. And his heart stopped, actually. And the defibrillator kicked in. And I was just amazed. I'm like, they put a defibrillator in your heart, like it's all in there as a package, and
all getting miniaturized.
He died in his sleep, and the next thing he knew, he was standing by his bedside, about as alert as having 10 cups of coffee. He's like, yeah, it's not the funnest thing when that thing goes off, but I died in my sleep.
Yep.
So, his wife was happy, and certainly as a family we were happy, but some of these he had I think one of the latest iterations, and I was joking with him. I'm like, I hope that thing isn't running on Windows 10. So, because because I don't know if that's good or bad, but hopefully you don't get the blue screen of death on that heart monitor. But you know, at least hopefully it's not Macintosh. You know, then it can't even go fast enough. But but no, it's just amazing the technology that you guys are developing and putting out there. So I highly recommend everyone check out their website. Go to Biotricity.com and check out the stuff that's there. Even if like gadgets, check out this BioFlex device that they have. And of course, maybe I guess supposed to ask your doctor about it if you are in some of this care group for some of these events.
Yeah, and we have a Twitter and social media, so follow us on that. And we're all putting out new blog posts and articles and kind of getting a pulse on and keeping it. Obviously for us, it's important to keep engaged with the trends in the market, and that is something that some of the people that follow us, follow our newsletter and whatnot, to get that kind of espresso shot version of what's going on in healthcare. To the best we can do it, we try and keep everyone apprised of what's the interesting stuff.
I get a lot of this healthcare stuff that's delivered to us, a review on the Chris Voss Show, and I've had, like I said, the Mocha Care, which and there's another product I think I had that's also a blood pressure monitor cuff. Withings has sent me all their stuff when it comes to the monitoring that you can take and have. That actually helped me lose about 70 pounds by monitoring what was going on with my life and improve the quality of my life. But being able to have those monitors and feedback, and then I think about these guys that are the human hackers, biohackers, where they hack their own bodies and stuff. It's kind of funny. I get so much IoT stuff now because that's in everything. And of course, over on my table here, I've got Google Home, Alexa, and Cortana devices that are now, and I think there's Amazon or somebody else is entering the market with these IoT command centers. I know Disney just put out something that does it, and I know a lot of them have this semblance of services that work with IFTTT, if this that then.com. And so I was just thinking funnily in my head, if I can have all my medical devices, hooked up to, Alexa and TTT. So everyone go check it out. Go to biotricity.com. Certainly appreciate you having you on the show, bud. Any other links we need to know so that people can go look them up and monitor what you guys are doing?
I would say everything's on the website. Join our newsletter. We've got our Twitter there, which is, I think, Biotricity_Inc. And we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. So, follow us, like us, and I will get you out a device so that you can do a little spot check and see how streamlined it is. So maybe we can get that happening for you as well.
So can I attach to myself without having a doctor? I can.
Oh yeah, super simple. Yeah,
I'll do a little review on it. It'll be fun. I think it's great, and of course, I'll get the word out on people that can go wander into their doctors and say, "Hey, I want this because I'm tired of coming to your office."
Exactly.
It'll help you guys, but yeah, I mean, definitely these sort of devices just really improve the quality of your life. I mean, I used to hate monitoring my health, but me monitoring my health and sometimes you're just like, am I having a heart attack or did I just go to Taco Bell? Is that Taco Bell quesadilla acting up, or am I having a health event? And sometimes that would be good to know. Anyway, we appreciate you coming to the show, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. We appreciate you guys as well. Be sure to refer a friend. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss and hit that bell notification button. Subscribe to the channel. Support, if you would, please. Likes and comments. We really love you guys as an audience and taking care of that. Go to patreon.com/Chris Voss to support the show. Go to iTunes, Google Play, and the TuneIn Now app so that you can take and subscribe to the podcast as well. Thanks for everyone for coming by, and we'll see you guys next time.